to episode 2, season 1, on your favorite rugby league show here on New Zealand Sport Radio. We appreciate you tuning in tonight and introducing you to my colleague, Brad Inger from Brad's Ramblings. Good evening, Brad.
Good evening, Sanjay. We've got a special show for you guys tonight. We also come up with a name for the show, and from now on, if anyone asks you what your favorite rugby league show is, you can tell them it's the Stand-Off with Sarge and Brad.
Yeah, excellent. As always, we're here on Wednesday evenings to bring you the week that was rugby league, and we'll cover everything that you need to know in the week that was. We'll cover the top stories of the week, preview round 4, we'll cover the top stories for the week, have a look at round 4 and preview round 5, and then we'll take a look at the international games, if any, and women in rugby league as well.
And while you're live here on Facebook, you can also catch our show via our podcast on iHeartRadio at your convenience. You can also check me out on Brad's Ramblings on Facebook as well. So tune in and get your rugby league news.
Great, we'll crack right into the top stories of the week. And I think without doubt on this side of the Tasman, much has been spoken about Shaun Johnson at the Sharks. However, they did come off a victory, which we'll dive into a little bit later. But I'd just like to go on and just give a bit of feedback in terms of what is being said over the Tasman and locally in terms of Shaun Johnson. It seems that now they're second guessing themselves as to whether they've made a good decision in, acquiring his services for 3 years. Brad, what do you have to say about that?
I think it's a lot of the same critiques he was getting when he was here. He gets a lot of money, as they say, and there's a lot of expectation on that. And Cooper Cronk came out pretty hard on him, I think. I don't know where to stand on it at the moment. I think he's rocks and diamonds, and nothing's really changed. He'll give you good, he'll give you bad. You just got to go with the ride.
Yeah, there was some interesting comments made by some of the media this week in that around the level of contact that he's willing to put himself through, and it wasn't until they sort of mentioned it that I sort of overanalyzed a little bit. And I mean, he does come from a touch rugby background, so he is instinctually, always trying to escape defenders. I mean, I guess anyone is, but in terms of player contact, I think that he does have to hit the line a bit more, and he does have to be willing to sacrifice himself a little bit more. And I think you might see a better Shaun Johnson if he's willing to sort of go down that path. But I mean, at the moment, like since winning the Golden Boot in 2014, he's ultimately been pretty disappointing, both for the Warriors and the Sharkies. And Cooper Cronk saying like he's firing blanks. He's not worth the 800K that he's on for 3 years, and he's more of a headache than anything else. So, I just I don't know. Obviously, the coaching staff have also expressed a little bit of disappointment in his performance. So we'll definitely have a look at it further when we jump into the round 4.
Yeah, definitely.
Other than that, I mean, the Tigers. Josh Reynolds, third drug test, some sort of, the media trying to make something out of nothing here. I think that he was cleared to play, and he's taking Benji's spot this weekend. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, that's correct. There was buzz. We talked about Buzz Rothfield last week, but he came off pretty quick. He got some news and he just put it out there straight away without actually doing any fact checking. Which is getting a lot of people's necks up, because it's at the moment it seems to be just getting it out there first as opposed to getting information out correct. So there was a false negative, a false positive, on the side of the road, and then he's tested negative back at the station, and I believe he's got a third test currently pending, but it all seems to be fine. It just seems to been a little bit too quick to try to get to the papers.
Yeah, just one of those situations where they're trying to make a story out of nothing, really. So I know we're mentioning it, for the sake of mentioning it, I suppose. But you've got some news on the Warriors there, Brad.
So they've announced this week a partnership with Redcliffe Dolphins in the Queensland Cup, to be a feeder club. It sounds like I haven't been able to investigate too much yet, but it sounds like we're completely shutting down the New South Wales Cup side that would be competing in Sydney and just fully going with Redcliffe. Good or bad, I'm not too sure. There's some good talent that comes out of Redcliffe. It's just a question of what's going to happen with the talent here. Are they going to have to relocate over there if there's no New South Wales Cup, or are they just going to end up playing Fox Memorial while they're here? I'm hopeful that the Warriors come out with some more information for the fans by the end of the weekend.
Yeah, definitely would be interesting.
Yeah, so we just got to wait and see what happens with that. But yeah, it could be good for the club. And
sorry, Brad.
No, you go.
Yeah, no, I was just saying, like obviously with us, the feeder club coming out of New South Wales at the moment. So if they do go north, I mean, which they have done, then are you saying that potentially the the Fox Memorial could be the feeding ground for the Warriors, and only the Fox Memorial?
Yeah, well, I think because they've shut down the New South Wales Cup team, which is based in New Zealand, that travel over. So I don't know. They haven't really explained what they're going to be doing with all the young talent that's here. If they're shipping them over to Redcliffe, or they're going to stay here and they're going to do another league for them. It's fresh off the press, so they just haven't really given us all the info yet.
Cool.
Next up, I got it. Next one, we got the Dragons. So McGregor met with the board yesterday about his future, and most people thought it was it. He was going to get the boot, but the board's backed him, and he's still coach. The only question is how long.
Yeah, I think that basically, I think that the media asked him this week, "Are you afraid?" He's like, "No, I'm not afraid. I could lose my job, but I'm not afraid." So he's very well aware of the situation that he's in, and another poor performance on the weekend, which we'll have a look in a little bit. So yeah, he's on thin ice, but at the moment, I guess you'd have to ask yourself, who's going to take his shoes? What's going to happen long term? He's been there for a few years now, hasn't he, at the Dragons, Brad?
He has, yeah. He's been there a couple of years now. I know they are interested in bringing Shane Flanagan in, but he's still currently suspended from being a head coach due to all the stuff with Cronulla and the peptides. So I think McGregor's just really going to be there until they're allowed to take Flanagan, and then they're going to ship him off.
Yeah, I heard some stories about Flanagan as well, as that he could be potentially linked back to the Sharks after his whole ordeal ends. That's again something that's come out of Australian media, and there's potential that he could be linked back there. Obviously, they won a premiership, didn't they, with him? So is that correct, Brad? Was it he was the one that took them to the premiership a few years back?
Yeah, he was. He was, and they when they were told he wasn't allowed to coach, they brought in Josh Morris, who's quite young. But we just got to wait and see what happens there. He might decide that he likes a challenge at St. George more.
Oh, excellent. Well, moving on, we've got Benji Marshall being dropped this week, and that's a big call. I think that was made yesterday in terms of the game this coming weekend. Brad, what do you make of it?
I was a bit surprised. We were talking last week about how he's turned back the clock and played really well. And admittedly, in the game we're going to talk about in a little bit, he didn't play that great, but he wasn't drop worthy. I still plenty left in the tank. It's gone from bad to worse for him this week because he's been basically put in a little bit of isolation because he gave a reporter a peck on the cheek today, and she's off for a COVID test. So even if he wasn't dropped, he wouldn't be playing this week anyway. But we just gotta see what happens. He'll be back there sooner rather than later.
Yeah, definitely. I think that was a shock to me as well to see that he's been omitted from this weekend's fixtures. But at the same time, they're not exactly setting the world on fire, and they're probably looking at some options there as well. But we'll have a look at that later on. But yeah, it's not. Oh,
Yeah, all right. Well, let's crack into round 4. On Thursday night, we had the Broncos losing to the Roosters 59-0. It was the biggest loss in the club's history, and just makes matters worse with that 58-0 loss to Parramatta in the finals last year. What are your thoughts on it, Sanj?
Yeah, I think that obviously it's been a pretty tough week for the old Broncos. 59-0 after a terrible defeat in the late stages of 2019 at Parramatta. Seabold is under all sorts of pressure. He's come out in a few interviews. He has taken responsibility, admittedly. He seems fairly genuine, but I think that he made the harsh calls to basically ramp up the roster and sort of shake out the cobwebs, and by getting rid of Nicarima Maguire, and Andrew McCulloch, who had a fantastic game for the Knights on the weekend as well. I think that he basically stripped them of all their experienced players, because as it stands right now, I was told that there's only around 10 players. There's about 10 players, sorry, that have played less than 30 NRL games. So that is a very inexperienced team to be, playing in the NRL. And obviously those other 3 that have been omitted from the roster would have bought that experience. And of course, they didn't anticipate Matt Gillett, unfortunately, getting medically retired there, Brad.
Yeah, that's right. And you got they've been very up and down. I think the problem is he has based his whole game plan around the 3 young forwards in Payne Haas, David Fafita, and Pangai Jr. And 2 out of the 3 are actually not available right now. So he's got about $4 million worth of talent on the sidelines right now. And they've got Ben Teo they've brought back from England, from rugby union, to try to help bring some experience in. But it's not looking good for Broncos fans right now.
What do you think they're going to do? Do you think they're going to look at Seabold and try and move him on?
I don't think they can. I think they went through so much to bring him in, getting rid of Wayne Bennett, that I think they're kind of stuck with him now, as bad as that sounds. But they need to, I'm lost for words on what they can do. They seem to be in trouble. I think they're just waiting for those injuries to come back. And then if the results keep going the way they are, then they're in serious trouble.
Could be in for a long season. But yeah, I mean, on the flip side for the Roosters, I mean, no Tedesco, no worries. They've had Morris had a blinder, and the inside centres are where they sort of did a lot of the running, and the inexperienced centres at the Broncos really just had no answer. They just teared them to shreds right up the middle. And it was an interesting point that I think it was Michael Ennis made on one of the shows the other day. He said that basically, your centres, they have to be very adaptable and they have to be very experienced. They're not obviously there's going to be new centres, but when you're playing up against an experienced lineup and when they're attacking you right on the edge of the ruck on every occasion, there's always going to be, deficiencies there if you're not up to speed with which way to go, so to speak. So it's very interesting that position of centre is fast becoming one of the most important positions in our game because of the speed of the play. I think that the running game has become more apparent. 5/8s and fullbacks are almost they're almost the same position kind of thing. So it's definitely enjoyable to watch. But I mean, this is what can happen as a result of you having inexperienced centres there, though. You'll drag up scorelines like 59-0. But yeah, I think that Broncos got a lot of work to do, and just have to wait and see.
Yeah, next up, of course, on Friday night, we had the Panthers defeating the Warriors 26-0. Bit of a disappointing game. The Warriors have crashed back to reality with that performance. The biggest concern was the lack of attack. They've now gone 2 out of 4 without scoring a single point. All those points have basically been in one game, which was the win against the Dragons. But their biggest issue was errors. They had 14 errors during the game, only one line break, a couple of offloads, and their defensive line speed was woeful.
Yeah, I think that the Warriors are in real trouble. Again, I mean, we were talking them up last week after 18-0 victory after the Dragons, and we both picked them to win this week. Maybe there's a little bit of optimism in that, but the reality is the way that they played on the weekend, it wasn't anything new to Warriors fans, unfortunately. Trapped in your own half, pounding away, trying to get out of there, a very small back five, a back five that couldn't penetrate the line and couldn't get yardage up against their opposition. And that just makes it tough trying to win games of rugby league from your own half. It just doesn't happen. These Australian teams, they are charging at you all the time. And I just don't understand why we are the team that doesn't seem to be playing as fast as everyone else, Brad.
Yeah, I thought they were playing really fast against the Dragons, but we've seen how bad the Dragons have been lately. So I think it was a bit of a little misdirect, and they're really missing their big guys out the back. So Ken Mamalo, David Fusatua, hopefully they're back soon to get some size out the back. You've got guys like Tohu Harris, who's been playing really well since coming back from the break. Katoa. Wade Engin's been playing well, but there's a lot of stuff he could be doing better. He needs, with this fast pace, you've seen a lot of teams really exposing people by running out of the ruck area, and he isn't doing that yet. I know the coaches have been pushing that that's something they want to bring in. So this week we might see that. But there's a lot of young guys in there who are doing quite well. They just need a little bit more help.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. But I just want to touch on, the halves combination as well. Look, Blake Green, look, whenever I watch this guy play, he just seems very calculated. Now, when I say very calculated, the way that he runs at the line, the way that he kicks the ball, the way that he kicks for touch, it's almost like he wants it to bounce end on end perfectly, and that's how he plays rugby league. Now, the modern day 5'8" or halfback, running at the line, being quite flamboyant, being quite instinctual at the line, I think is important. I think he just doesn't have it. He's definitely a good player and he's a good halfback, but is he a halfback that's going to take us to a premiership victory? I don't know. I'm having doubts. I've always had doubts since he's been here, and just little things that he's doing. I just find that he doesn't penetrate the line like other halfbacks. He doesn't create many opportunities either. And I think that he really has to just take a few more risks, and back himself a little bit more, and play like the Warriors play. I think he plays a little bit differently from perhaps the rest of the team. I know that may sound odd, but I just think that he just needs to become a bit more of a free ranging halfback and just play. Play what's in front of you. Have a looking behind the gaps. Look for the opportunity that's perhaps not there, and play towards that. So. Yeah, but that's just one part of it. I don't think that that's the answer for the Warriors. Is just a premier halfback. I think that there's other issues there, which clearly illustrated on the weekend.
Yeah, definitely. I think Blake Green, his style of play contradicts the rest of the team, which there's no cohesiveness there. And I would be bringing in Chanel Harris-Tavita, just a little bit of spark. Worst case scenario, it doesn't work, but it's not working now. So why not try Tavita,
it? And you're right. And I think he had a couple of good games he was playing pretty well pre-COVID, wasn't he? He had a couple of starts, and so he's not injured. He's just been not picked at the moment, Brad?
Just not picked at the moment.
Okay. So, well, yeah. I mean, hey, look, that's one part of it. Like you said, Tohu Harris, sorry, he's had 2 good games in a row now, and he really played his heart out the other day. I think that he definitely deserves a mention, and Egan as well. I think that those two for me were the players of the game. But still, yeah, absolutely pumped is the word I would use. I would say that Matt Burton, though, on the other hand, he had a fantastic game, and there's been a lot said about him this week in the media, and the fact of the matter is, he could be a real threat. And it looks like it'll be him and Cleary this weekend, Brad.
Yeah, so he got, after that good showing, he got to keep his job when Cleary came back this week. Very talented, very quick. He had a lot of accuracy with his kicks, and he was playing like his job was on the line, because it was. And it's good to see some young talent coming through with a bit of heart. So I'm enjoying seeing what he's going to do in the future.
Yeah, he definitely he reminds me similar. He plays a similar style to, I guess, what's his name down in Melbourne? His name just eludes me at the moment. The Queensland 5'8", who we're going to talk about in just a second. Munster. Yeah, Cameron Munster. Sorry, the name just but he's got a similar free ranging kind of style to him, and so yeah, I mean he looks like he's going to be a huge threat in the future. But yeah, overall, I'm just totally disappointed in the Warriors. Obviously, there's also an injury for the Ken Mamala injury. We know when he's back, Brad.
I'm hoping. I think the last time they said was like round 6, round 7, because it was a hamstring. I'm hoping for sooner, but they've penciled in around round 6.
Right. Well, hey, look, let's hope for Warriors fans and for us as well that they can kick back and not kick back, they can kick on and give us some results this coming weekend, because a lot of the teams are starting to really play some fantastic footy, and we don't want to get left behind. So in saying that, we'll crack into the next game of the round, which was on Friday night. We had the Storm up against the Rabbitohs, and I called it last week that you're not going to beat this Melbourne team twice in a row. Melbourne aren't going to have back-to-back losses. The Rabbitohs, apparently they've never beaten Melbourne in Melbourne, and Melbourne came away with the points 22-8, in which was a fairly natural performance for the Melbourne, who look like they're getting used to the new rules, Brad.
Yeah, after giving them a bit of stick, saying they wouldn't adjust to this new style of play, they came out and did just that. So they figured out how to still do their wrestle, but not as long, which has stopped them getting those 6 again calls against them. And they impressed me. They played really well. But I think on the losing side, Latrell Mitchell had his best performance in a Rabbitohs jersey and is starting to show that quality player he was for the Roosters, which can only do good things for the Rabbitohs.
Yeah, I think it was a tight tussle, and I think that Wayne Bennett wouldn't have been overly disappointed in the way that they played. He'd probably be disappointed that it got out to 22-8, and that was probably not a true reflection of how tight it indeed was. But yeah, look, the Rabbitohs, they're still they're a team to look out for. I think that they'll develop, and he's a seasoned campaigner, obviously, Wayne Bennett. So with Latrell at the back, they've got a little bit of getting used to each other as well, because he's new to it. So their combinations are still taking a little bit of time to sink, but I reckon they're going to be right there or thereabouts come finals time.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And then next up we had the Eels beating the Sea Eagles 19-16, and the most talked about game of the round. I thought Mitchell Moses was outstanding. Eels are now 4-0 for the first time since 1989. Manly fought back though; they were 18-2 down. So to come back and almost win it with the forward pass that I personally don't think it was a forward pass, but Graham Allensley's come out and said that the refs got it wrong as well. But that seems to happen with the Eels. The Warriors had the same thing happen last year against them at Bankwest.
Yeah, they've obviously throughout the week, since the weekend, they've overanalyzed this pass, and if you watch it like a computer game, it's forward. The line where the ball goes, it's forward. But if you're talking about rugby league momentum, had the player passed that point, where was the ball when it landed in the recipient's hand? There's all sorts of questions, but I just can't believe they made such a balls up out of it. Like, I don't think that it should have been called forward, and I don't think it should have. I don't think the try should have been disallowed as a result. But I also, as interesting as you say, in terms of the past, people are starting to question, perhaps, would a second referee have made a difference? I don't know. I don't think so. I think it was just, it was one of those passes that was always going to be borderline. A fair bit of controversy around it, and I just think that it was blown out of proportion. I think the players took it quite well. So let's just move on.
Yeah. So then next up on Saturday we had the Sharks defeating the Cowboys 26-16. Sharks' first win of the season. after all the flack Johnson got. He played really well in that game. A few kicks didn't go where they wanted, but he got a few try assists and that out there, and he's starting to click with his outside edges, which is where the Cowboys struggled.
Yeah, it's interesting that right edge. They're going to be quite competitive down that right hand flank of the side, right hand side of the field. Sorry, and if they can get, obviously with Jesse Ramian there, he had 2 tries on the weekend, and probably his best game they're saying for a couple of years. So, with him being able to sort of produce that kind of dent in the opposition centers on that right edge, I think they could be a real threat for other sides in the competition. And you've got to be pretty quick to play against Sean Johnson. I know that we've just talked about him earlier, but he can, if he is given half an opportunity, then he can create gaps, and if got speed men around him, then definitely there's going to be tries to be had on that right side.
Definitely, and the Cowboys were their own worst enemies. They made 17 errors in that game, and if you don't have respect for the ball, it's not going to respect you. And they were punished because of it. They had some injuries. They obviously, Jason Tomololo, the biggest one. He should be back. He's been named in the extended bench this week. So if he does come back, it'll be good for Cowboys fans. Probably not so much for Warriors fans. But Cohen Hess has actually been brought straight back in as well. So they've got some of their big boys back, which I think will help.
Yeah, the Cowboys obviously they like to lead from the front, don't they, with the likes of Tamalolo? So yeah, it should be interesting once those characters are back and see if what they can do in round 5. But what we'll move on to now is what I would say is the shock of the round for mine. I'm not going to call it the game of the round, but definitely the shock of the round for mine. The Knights 34 versus the Raiders 18, and yeah, basically a fantastic performance by the Knights. They absolutely beat them up the middle. And it was a very, very strong performance from an undefeated Knights team who are now second on the ladder. And the start that they've had, the coaches are thrilled with it. So yeah, I think that Ponga had a fantastic game. His involvement was huge, and he's already starting to be compared to the likes of Bradley Clyde Fittler, Laurie Daly. So he's only 18 years old, I believe, and he's got a long way to go. So if he's already been compared to the likes of those great players, then I think we're going to see a lot more from this kid, Brad.
Yeah, he made up for lost time after not being there last week. I think he scored basically almost on his first touch, and he's an exciting player. And yeah, the Raiders, I don't know if they got too far ahead of themselves, thinking everyone talking them up, and they kind of let it off after the Knights had that draw against the Panthers. But yeah, it was definitely a wake-up call for them, and I don't want to be their opponents this week, that's for sure.
No, I think that, they definitely had a fantastic game on the weekend. And, the fact that they've actually now managed to, not go, go without, they haven't lost yet. They've basically had that draw, obviously, against the Penrith Panthers. I think that they are going to be a team to be reckoned with as well. Particularly, they've still got a few stars to come back in their lineup. And yeah, I just, the Raiders, I haven't seen them play that badly for quite some time. It was quite a shock to actually see that. I tipped them to definitely win. But the fact that they lost 34-18, it was interesting. Ricky Stewart has come out and said, he's keen to quickly forget that game. So, they don't want to be dwelling over it, because I think that there's a psychological thing about this game that if they really let it get to them, then it could be detrimental to the way that they approach coming games. For example, Ricky said that they played like children, and it was the worst that they've played in 2 years. So, we just have to wait and see what happens with the Raiders this coming weekend. Obviously, we've predicted them, Brad, as being contenders or thereabouts.
Yeah, definitely. I think they're still there. I think every team just needs a bit of a reality check from time to time, which they've definitely got now. So that takes us into Sunday's first game, which is my shock of the round, with the Titans defeating the Tigers 28-23. Yeah, what do you think about it?
I think this was the game of the round for mine. I know that a lot of people would say that the Manly versus Eel game was the game of the round, but if you watch this game, and I watched the entire game in terms of the Titans game, and you always just thought on this occasion that the Titans were going to get there. They were 12-0. They had 12-point deficits twice in the game, and however they looked physically strong, and I thought it was going to be their night, and to come back from 12-0 deficits twice. I think Jason Holbrook, he was a very happy man. Post-match interview, he looks very calm and collected for his 4 games in now, and that's his first victory. But he's more happy for everyone at the club. He seems like a real team player, and he seems like, from what I've seen so far, he looks a good coach. So, yeah.
Yeah, it was. They were almost a year since their last win. It was 364 days since their last victory. So I'm sure the whole club would have been rapt to finally get one up. And yeah, they just didn't look like they wanted to quit. And they've had that this year in a few games. I think it was round 1. They played the Raiders and they got blown off the park in the end, but they were competitive for a long stage. So they've got some talent there. They just got to get it all to work together. And they might not get the wooden spoon this year like everyone thought they would.
Yeah, I think you're right. When you talk about they didn't give up or they didn't throw the towel in and they played for the full 80. But I think what we've seen in recent weeks with the new rules and the speed of the game in this competition this year, it could have easily been a blowout, Brad. And the fact of the matter is that they held on and held on and held on, and so they made a contest of it. And dare I say, this is what we want the Warriors to do. I know we've already had a chat about the Warriors game, but this is what the Titans did on the weekend. They made a game of it, and I thought it was fantastic to see them get a victory. I was really happy for them because they've been battered and bruised, and I think last year as well they were going to get eliminated from the competition, and but the Gold Coast, they've always traditionally struggled. It will be a really good story to see if they can turn it around this year and go somewhere with their rugby league.
Yeah, definitely. It will be interesting to see. But unfortunately, we're going to the last game of the round, which was probably the worst game I've seen in a long time, which was the Bulldogs beating the Dragons 22-2. It's the battle for the wooden spoon right now, and it was boring, to be blatantly obvious. The Dragons are in a dire need of a wake-up call. I don't know what's going on with the club, but they only scored 2 points in that game, and that was in the first 5 minutes. So there were 75 minutes where they were not scoring points, and they never looked like they were going to. The Bulldogs weren't that great, but Kieran Foran's return showed promise. So the Bulldogs, if they can get a bit of that Titan spirit in there, they could cause some upsets along the line too.
Yeah, 22-2. It's not a flattering scoreline, but hey, at least you scored 2 points. This weekend. There's nothing better than getting a point on the board, but when you get none, you sort of you walk away a tad disappointed. But yeah, I think it was a very boring game. I didn't watch the whole thing. I was that bored. Just even watching half time, I was just like, oh, this is not going to be something that you're wanting to watch. But hey, look, I plowed on, and I definitely saw that the wooden spoon battle is well and truly on, and I think you have to chuck a few other clubs in the mix. And at the moment, dare I say, the Warriors would probably be part of that lower end group of the competition. I don't think we're going to end up last, but I just think that that's where we're compared to at the moment. End of the line for McGregor. I think the writing's on the wall for him. I just don't know what options they have really if they do get rid of him. So it'll be interesting to see what happens this weekend. And yeah, the week that was next week when we analyse this, we'll be able to perhaps give you an update on Paul McGregor.
Yeah, for sure. So before we move on, we should talk about our picks that we did.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, not a good week. I got 3 from 8.
I've let myself have 3 from 8. I know I didn't exactly pick a winner in the Bulldogs Dragons game, but it was as boring a game as anything. So I think that you let me have that one, Brad, and I'll end up at 3 from 8 as well.
Yeah, I think we were pretty close. I think we disagreed on the Storm Rabbitohs game, so you bet me on that one. But yeah, hopefully our picks are a bit more accurate this week.
Yeah, well, it's going to take a couple of weeks for us. Oh, sorry.
No, you go.
No, it's going to take a couple of weeks for us to sort of get used to, the teams again. And I think, even now that we're a couple of weeks in, we're starting to really see which teams are serious contenders and which teams are struggling. There's always those teams in the middle of the road as well, and we traditionally have always been one of those teams, the New Zealand Warriors, that is. But the level of excitement, Brad, I have to say, it's there, and it's gotten the sporting world buzzing again to have this great game of ours back.
Yeah, definitely. So before we get on to the round 5 previews, we should answer some questions. Paul, have you got some questions there for us?
Yeah, so over on the YouTube, there was the question of basically, are the Warriors in the spoon mix with the Dragons and Dogs, though? This is from Sturlo Usus. He say, look, as Warriors fan, are we in that mix?
I think at the moment they are. Currently, they've scored the least amount of points out of any NRL club. It's 24 points so far in 4 rounds. And if they don't get those points on the board, I don't see wins coming their way either. So they are definitely still in talks for wooden spoon. Unfortunately, they've never had it before, but there's always a first time for everything.
Well, yes, as he says, never won a title either. He puts in the chat there. You mentioned during the chats there about there being some blowouts since the return. Look, we've had a bunch of lopsided results. What do we think this is down to? Is it down to the 6 again? Is it down to not having crowds there and teams just getting down themselves? Is it down to how teams have just handled the lockdown? What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a little bit in new rules that have sort of brought a different dynamic to some of the games, but I genuinely don't believe it's because of that. I think that the losses, the blowouts that you've seen a absolutely dominant Roosters team, which have been over the last 4 or 5 seasons, thrash probably the most inexperienced Broncos team ever. So I don't think that really had anything to do with the new rule changes. I think they're quite fit, those young lads, and most of the teams are showing good energy levels. Yes, a lot of the teams are showing a little bit of tiredness near the end of the games. But no, I think that to blame it on those new rules is probably not fair. I'm thinking that we're starting to see where teams will end up quite early in this year's competition.
Yeah, I think there's a bit of I think with the new rules, it's more about the momentum. I think if a team runs on with a few lucky calls their way and they build some momentum, it is hard to wrestle it back. But teams have shown us that it can be done. The Titans are a great example. So
just have a look at the leaderboard there as well, Brad. We've got the Eels and the Knights are at the top there. The Panthers have played well, the Raiders as well. But I still think that the Rabbitohs down in 13th spot, they're part of that mix as well, if you ask me. Bulldogs, they had that win, I think, on the weekend. But other than that, really haven't fired too many shots. So those middle teams, those West Tigers, the Sharks, I think the Broncos, I think you'll see them slip a little bit further. Their confidence levels are shot. But I just think that, there's going to be 3 sort of distinctive areas for teams, I think, this year. There'll be those teams that are right at the top. There'll be a middle patch, and then there'll be those that are just going to be fighting for that wooden spoon and struggling.
Yeah, one thing you didn't mention there that I guess has got to be in the talks, there'll be the Roosters as well. You talked about how the Warriors can't win games because they can't score points, but the Roosters, sure, they sure can score points when it goes their way, can't they?
They can indeed, yeah. It's attack's very vital, especially with this fast style. So if you want to be in with a grin, you've got to start putting some points on the board.
Cool. Well, that's our questions from the live chat, guys. I'll leave you to preview the next round.
Thanks, Paul.
Yeah, look, we'll crack into round 5, and let's hope our picks are a little bit better this week than they were last week, Brad. But on Thursday night, we've got the Eagles, the Manus Eagles, that is playing the Broncos. Seagulls, not surprising, paying $1.21 to the Broncos, $4.35 at Central Coast Stadium on the weekend. So that should be a fantastic game for the Eagles, I think, because I don't think the Broncos have got any show of hope of winning that game.
No. So I've picked the Eagles as well. Eagles have been looking good, and the Broncos haven't. So the inclusion of Ben Teo will give them a little bit of beef in the middle, but I think the Eagles are just going to be too strong.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that so we're both going for the Eagles. We're both putting the Eagles down to win that one. On Friday night, we've got the Warriors versus the Cowboys at Central Coast Stadium. Warriors paying $2.85 to the Cowboys, $1.42, Brad.
Yeah. Normally I'd like to back the Warriors on this one, but I'm going the Cowboys. They both didn't play well last week, but I just think the Cowboys forwards are going to do the job, and then their halves are more exciting and create more potential to score. So until the Warriors can figure out how to attack properly, I don't see them picking up a win.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'd have to agree with you on that one. I'm going the Cowboys this weekend. I think that they traditionally we've had good games against the Cowboys, and we've actually notched up a few decent wins against them, and we generally play pretty good against them. But yeah, I just think that after seeing the Warriors against the Panthers, and you know what the Cowboys can do, I think that they will be too strong for us come the weekend.
Yeah, exactly. And then next up on Friday night, we've got the Eels against the Panthers. Eels are paying $1.44 to the Panthers, $2.75, and I think it's going to be rinse and repeat of what we just said about the Warriors Cowboys. I think the Eels will run the Panthers off the park.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I mean, obviously, we've got Nathan Cleary coming back into the mix. So it's actually shaping up to be quite an exciting game, that one. I think that's definitely one to look out for this weekend. One of the games of the round, I would say. It's going to be obviously a Friday night game. So we can expect to see a few points put on offer from both sides, I reckon.
Yeah, it could be a potential game of the round. But then on Saturday, we see the Rabbitohs versus the Titans. Rabbits are paying $1.25 to the Titans, $3.90. The Titans showed spirit, but the Rabbitohs, I think, are going to be hurting from that loss against Storm, are going to come out and get the win.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt. I think the Rabbitohs deserved favourites for the game. I don't know if 390s. I'd be putting some money on that if I was a betting man, because I think that's a bit hard on the old Titans. They didn't win the week before, but they played a solid game and they were in the contest. They won on the weekend, and that was a grind against, perhaps not the best team in the NRL and the Tigers. But hey, I'm really looking forward to seeing the Titans give them again what I would like to call a contest. You know, if they can stay in the contest for as long as 60, 70 minutes, who knows what can happen in the last 10, 20 minutes. And they showed that on the weekend. So they came away with the points there. And hey, I'm looking forward to that game. But I have got the Rabbits to win.
Yeah, same here. So before we go on, I just saw a question by Simon asking about the fixtures that you can see there, if the Australian times or not. There are Australian times on there. So yeah. I think you just add 2 hours for our times here. But then that leads us to the Knights versus the Storm. Knights are 235 against the Storm, 160. I'm going with the Storm, but I think it's going to be a hell of a game seeing how the Knights played last week.
Yeah, I think you could get quite overexcited about the fact that the Knights beat the Raiders. You got to remember that was one of the worst Raiders performances we've seen in a very long time, and it was a very, very good performance by the Knights. So if those two teams were to meet the game this weekend, I don't know if I'd be picking automatically the Knights to beat the Raiders again. And in saying that, I think that the Storm will be too strong for them. Hey, it'll be a great game. I don't doubt that, but I don't think that the Knights are going to beat the Storm. The Storm really last week showed. On the weekend, they did show that they have quickly done a little bit of homework. Bellamy, he doesn't muck around. He'll get the lads in there. He would have overanalyzed it. He would have beaten them up and been like, look, guys, we have to come out and win this game. There's no ifs, buts, or maybes. And they did that quite clinically against the Rabbitohs on the weekend. So, I'm going the Storm.
And then next up was the Tigers versus the Raiders. So the Tigers are paying $3.35 to the Raiders $1.32. But like we talked earlier, I think it was a wake-up call for the Raiders, and I think they're going to be too strong for the Tigers.
Yeah, I think so. I think the Tigers got a few issues. Obviously, they've dumped Marshall. Don't know if that was the right move at this time. And the Raiders, they'll be hurting from that loss on the weekend, so they're going to come out, and play some strong footy. Obviously, it's very much a traditional rivalry between the West Tigers, formerly known as Balmain, of course, against the Canberra Raiders. So there's, and is the crowd back this weekend in Australia, Brad, or is that just for Super Rugby fixtures over here?
It's just for over here. I know they're still trying to push it, but there's been nothing yet. So
Okay.
yeah, you can only watch it live if you're in New Zealand right now.
No. So yeah, definitely. I'm going for I'll definitely tip the Raiders to win that one comfortably.
Yeah, and then on to Sunday, we've got the Bulldogs against the Roosters. Bulldogs are paying $6.50 to the Roosters $1.11, and yeah, I think the Roosters are gonna do some horrible things to the Bulldogs, unfortunately.
Yeah, poor old Dean Pay and the Bulldogs. Coming up against the Roosters outfit who slammed 59 points on the team. Yeah, I'd be very, very careful about that 10 meters. I'd be keeping a very, very tight 10 meters, and where I can, I'd be pushing the boundaries really on the penalty to try and stop this Roosters flow of attack. Because if they get going, they can put some points on you, and they're probably so far, they're the most punishing side so far in the competition. But also, they haven't had any tight tussles against top teams at the top of the table. But I think that they are going to be a team that's going to be, again, thereabouts, because the Roosters, they're always come to play. So
Yeah.
I'm backing them in on the weekend.
Yeah, same here. So, and then the last game of the round is the Dragons versus the Sharks. Dragons are paying $2.50 to the Sharks $1.53. You'd have to be crazy to go with the Dragons, so I'm sticking with the Sharks here. I think the talk about Sean seems to have got the Sharks players a bit upset as well, so I think they'll be out to prove something. And unfortunately, the Dragons are just going to go down again.
Yeah, well, the Sharks coming off that victory on the weekend, I think that they'll take a little bit away from that. I don't know if it's a turning point in their season. I mean, it seems like a shortened season. I know that there's still quite a few games to go, but I think that they've just got to keep away from the drama and just concentrate on giving Sean a little bit more ball, but also Sean taking it to the line and getting a bit more physically involved. I think that is a must if this team is going to win a competition this year.
Yeah, definitely.
We've got our picks. Yeah. Oh, sorry, Brad. We've got our. I was just going to say we've got our picks here. We'll just clarify the picks for the listeners. So we're both going with the Eagles on Saturday night. We've got the Cowboys. I'm going for the Panthers against the Eels. We're both picking the Rabbitohs and the Storm and the Raiders, and of course the Roosters and Sharks. So there's only one game there, Brad, that we are picking a different team this weekend. So it should be interesting to see how many we get. Of course, it's not about you and I seeing how much we get against each other, seeing if we can actually pick the ones that actually win it as rugby league enthusiasts. So should be interesting to see.
Yeah, fingers crossed we get a bit more right this week.
Yes, hope so. Much better than last week, Brad.
Yeah. All right. So before we sign off, we'll talk about some international and women's rugby league. So there's been some updates on both sides. So the Super League has started meetings to get their season back underway. They're potentially talking about getting the grand final played late November, early December. So it'd be good to see them get back into the swing of things. What that does for the players that are leaving the Super League to come to NRL next year, I'm not too sure with that pushback time, if that means they're going to be late starting next season for the clubs. There hasn't been any clarification on that, but it'll be good for the UK to get some league back up and running.
Yeah, definitely. Like, we all keep an eye on the Super League, and particularly the Kiwis in the Super League. So I don't know what's going to happen internationally in terms of international fixtures this year. I'm guessing they'll just can it because they don't really pay too much attention to it anyway. But yeah, there hasn't been any news on that, but we'll keep you updated if there is any news on what they're planning to do internationally. If anything, I can only really imagine there'd be a trans-Tasman match. I don't think that they'd be going further abroad at this stage. So now let's see what happens. And of course, we've got the women's NRL returning. Now you were saying starting in September, Brad?
Yeah, I heard it's starting September. I believe November is the Origin girls clash, but it's still, they were looking at expanding the teams, but with everything that's gone on, they've stuck with the original 4, which is the Broncos, the Dragons, the Roosters, and the Warriors. So it's good to see the Warriors are still going to have a team in there, because there were talks about them putting it off for a year. But it'll be good to see them get some girl football out there. Same as last year, they're going to start up in the playoffs. But yeah, really exciting to see that they're still going to get some time in the sun.
Good opportunity for the women in the game. So it's good that they didn't. I mean, there were thoughts of sort of just pushing their competition to the side for the rest of the year, but because they only play, I know, a limited amount of games. But I think they've made a good decision in trying to marry it in with the final series. So yeah, look, well, that sort of wraps it up tonight, ladies and gentlemen. So thanks for tuning in, and on the air tonight on New Zealand Sports Radio, and joining our latest show, the Standoff with Sanjay and Brad.
Yeah, and for your weekly update on rugby league, tune into our podcast on iHeartRadio or on Facebook. Just search for New Zealand Sport Radio.
Good evening.
Talk to you next week.